Have you ever noticed something strange? You can spend an entire day surrounded by people and still feel like you have nothing to say. Not because you forgot the English language, not because you're unintelligent, not even because you're shy. You simply open your mouth and your mind goes completely blank. It usually happens at the worst possible moment. You're sitting across from someone you genuinely want to know better. Maybe it's your first day at a new job. Maybe it's a first date. Maybe you're meeting your friend's friends for the first time. For a few seconds, everything feels normal. Then there's a pause, a tiny one, barely 2 seconds, but inside your head, it feels like an hour. Suddenly your brain starts searching. Say something. Ask another question. Don't let this get awkward. The harder you search, the less you find, and then the conversation quietly slips away. Hours later, while brushing your teeth, driving home, or lying in bed, the perfect response suddenly appears. Actually, not just one, 10 of them, and you can't help wondering, where were those words 30 minutes ago? Most people think this happens because they're bad at conversations. That's the story they've been telling themselves for years. I'm awkward. I'm boring. I'm just not a people person. It's a comforting explanation because if that's true, then there's nothing left to figure out. But what if that story is completely wrong? Think about someone you know who's incredibly easy to talk to. Maybe it's a friend, a teacher, a coworker, someone who can walk into a room full of strangers and somehow leave with three new friends. Have you ever noticed something interesting about people like that? They rarely sound like they're trying to impress anyone, like they're not constantly telling incredible stories. They're not delivering perfectly rehearsed jokes. Most of the time, they're simply paying attention. Attention, it's such an ordinary word that almost nobody realizes how powerful it is. Because here's something most people never think about. Long before a conversation begins, your brain has already decided what it believes is worth noticing. Imagine two people walking through the exact same neighborhood. The first person notices traffic, noise, crowds, nothing unusual. The second notices a tiny family-owned bakery tucked between two apartment buildings, an old man teaching his granddaughter how to ride a bicycle, a dog refusing to walk because it wants to watch pigeons. They're walking through the same street, but they're collecting completely different memories. Now imagine both people sit down for coffee later that afternoon. Who do you think has more to talk about, the person with the better vocabulary or the person who simply noticed more? Here's the strange part. Most of us weren't always like this. Remember being a kid? You could spend 20 minutes talking about a weird-shaped cloud, a bug crawling across the sidewalk, a cardboard box that somehow became a spaceship. Nothing needed to be extraordinary, everything already was. So what changed? Did the world become less interesting, or did we slowly stop looking? That's where this story really... People believe conversations happen in real time. They don't. The conversation you're having right now actually started long before you opened your mouth. It started with what you noticed this morning. The thoughts you paid attention to, the questions that crossed your mind, the little moments you almost ignored. Imagine carrying an empty backpack all day. Then, right before meeting someone, you suddenly expect to pull something interesting out of it. Well, of course, there's nothing inside. You never collected anything. Conversation works the same way. Every interesting observation, right, every strange question, every tiny experience is something your future self gets to talk about. But here's what most of us do instead. We spend hours consuming, scrolling, watching, listening, reading. By the end of the day, our minds feel full. Yet when someone asks, so, what's been on your mind lately? We freeze, because we consumed thousands of thoughts, but almost none of them were actually ours. Think about the last video you watched before this one. Can you remember every detail? Probably not. Now think about the last time something genuinely surprised you in real life. Maybe you saw a little kid trying to teach his grandfather how to use a smartphone. Maybe you watched two strangers laughing like lifelong friends. Maybe you noticed an elderly man buying flowers for no special occasion. Those moments stay with you, not because they were louder, because they belong to you. Here's something fascinating. Your brain remembers experiences differently than information. Information passes through. Experience leaves fingerprints. That's why people who live interesting lives usually sound interesting, not because they have perfect communication skills, because they're carrying around hundreds of little moments that belong only to them. Now here's the mistake almost everyone makes. They think becoming a better conversationalist means learning better answers, better jokes, better stories, better techniques. But the best conversationalists aren't answer collectors, they're question collectors. They walk through life constantly wondering, why do people do that? Why is that cafe always full? Why do some songs instantly remind us of childhood? Why do dogs always seem to know who loves them? Most people see ordinary things. Curious people see unfinished mysteries, and every mystery naturally creates another conversation. Here's a challenge. The next time you're walking somewhere, leave your headphones in your pocket just for 10 minutes. Look around like you've never been there before. Notice the signs, the architecture, the expressions on people's faces, the little details you've walked past 100 times. You'll discover something strange. The world starts becoming generous again. It quietly hands you stories you didn't know existed, and then something unexpected happens. You stop worrying about what to say because your mind is no longer empty. It's full of observations waiting to be shared. But there's still one problem. If noticing more is the answer, see, why do so many people stop noticing in the first place? The answer has less to do with conversations, but and much more to do with the way we've trained our attention. Imagine you buy a brand new car. Something interesting happens. Suddenly, you start seeing that exact same car everywhere. Not because thousands of people bought it overnight, it was always there. Your brain simply decided, this matters now. Psychologists call this selective attention. Your brain can't notice everything, so it creates filters. Every second, millions of pieces of information fight for your attention. The sound of an air conditioner, the feeling of your clothes against your skin, the smell of coffee, someone laughing across the room, the color of the sky. If your brain tried to process all of it, you'd be overwhelmed within minutes. So instead, it asks one question. What's worth noticing? And whatever answer you repeatedly give becomes your reality. Here's the problem. Most of us spend hours every day training our brains to notice only what's loud. The funniest clip, the biggest headline, the most shocking opinion, the most dramatic argument, the fastest entertainment. After enough repetition, ordinary life starts feeling strangely quiet. Not because it changed, because your attention changed. Imagine listening to music at maximum volume every day. Eventually, a normal conversation starts sounding almost too quiet. The same thing happens with your mind when your attention becomes addicted to constant stimulation. The subtle details that make conversations interesting simply stop reaching your awareness. That's why two people can attend the exact same party and leave with completely different experiences. One says nothing really happened. The other says, you won't believe what I noticed tonight. The difference wasn't luck, it was attention. Here's a strange experiment. Think about your favorite person to talk to. Now ask yourself, are they actually the funniest person you know? The smartest? The most successful? Maybe, but probably not. What usually makes them unforgettable is that they notice things everyone else misses. They'll stop in the middle of a conversation and say, did you notice that every family at this restaurant ordered dessert before they finished dinner? Or, isn't it funny how airports somehow make everyone walk faster? Tiny observations, nothing life-changing, yet suddenly, everyone has something to say because great conversations rarely begin with brilliant ideas. They begin with shared attention. One person notices something, another person adds to it. A third person remembers a similar experience. Before anyone realizes it, 30 minutes have disappeared. Not because someone had perfect social skills, because curiosity became contagious. And here's where everything changes. Stop trying to become someone who always has the perfect thing to say. Become someone who notices one interesting thing every single day. Just one. A strange habit, an unexpected conversation, a funny coincidence, a question you can't answer, a small moment that made you smile. After 1 week, you'll have 7 stories. After 1 month, 30. After 1 year, hundreds, without reading a single book on conversation, because interesting people aren't built by learning conversation techniques. They're built by collecting moments that make them stop and think. But there's one final misunderstanding, one that's responsible for more awkward conversations than almost anything else. And once you see it, you'll never think about talking to people the same way again. But there's one final misunderstanding, one that's responsible for more awkward conversations than almost anything else. Most people think conversations are performances. They're not. They're explorations. That single misunderstanding changes everything. Think about what happens just before you speak. Your brain quietly asks, is this interesting enough? Will they think I'm weird? What if this sounds stupid? What if they don't care? Notice something? None of those questions are about the other person. They're all about you. Without realizing it, you've turned a conversation into an audition. You're no longer trying to discover someone. You're trying to survive their opinion, and survival is terrible for curiosity. Imagine walking into a museum. One person walks in thinking, I wonder what I'll discover today. Another walks in thinking, I hope everyone here thinks I look smart. They're standing in the exact same building, but they're having completely different experiences. Conversation works exactly the same way. The moment your attention shifts inward, your curiosity disappears. You stop noticing stories. You stop hearing little details. You stop asking follow-up questions because your mind is busy managing your image. Ironically, that's usually the exact moment the conversation becomes awkward. Here's something fascinating. Have you ever talked to someone who made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room? When you walked away, you probably thought, they're such an amazing conversationalist. But think about what they actually did. Did they tell incredible stories? Not necessarily. Did they dominate the conversation? Probably not. Most likely, they listened, really listened. They noticed the excitement in your voice. They caught the tiny detail everyone else ignored. Then they became genuinely curious. And curiosity has a strange effect. It makes people feel seen. That's why the best conversations rarely feel like interviews. They feel like two people exploring an idea together. One observation leads to another. One memory unlocks another. One question creates 3 more. Nobody is trying to impress anyone. They're simply following their curiosity wherever it goes. Here's a challenge. The next time someone tells you a story, resist the urge to think about your response. Instead, pretend they're giving you the first chapter of a mystery. What's missing? What don't you know yet? What made them feel that way? What happened next? Suddenly, you'll notice something incredible. People love talking to curious people, not because curiosity is a technique, but because genuine curiosity is incredibly rare. Most people are waiting for their turn to speak. Very few are completely present, and presence is unforgettable. Here's the irony. The people who never seem to run out of things to say usually spend less time thinking about what they're going to say and more time paying attention to what's already being said. That's why conversations flow naturally around them. Not because they're always talking, because they're always discovering. And once you stop trying to be the most interesting person in the conversation, something unexpected happens. You become exactly that. You become exactly that, not because you finally learned the perfect conversation trick, but because you stop treating conversations like something to win. Think back to the best conversation you've ever had, not the funniest, not the longest, the one that stayed with you. Chances are, you don't remember every sentence. You remember how it felt. You felt understood, comfortable, curious, safe enough to say what you were actually thinking. That's the part most people miss. People don't remember conversations because of the words. They remember them because of the feeling those words created. Imagine meeting two different people. The first person tells incredible stories. They've traveled everywhere, done amazing things. Every sentence is entertaining, but somehow you leave feeling invisible. The second person has lived a completely ordinary life. No unbelievable adventures, no celebrity stories, no dramatic experiences. Yet an hour later, you realize you never wanted the conversation to end. Why? Because they made you feel like your thoughts mattered. That's a rare gift. And here's something surprising. It has almost nothing to do with being extroverted. Some of the best conversationalists are actually quiet people, not because they speak less, because when they do speak, it's clear they've been, because when they do speak, it's clear they've been paying attention to the conversation, to the person, to the moment. And maybe that's the biggest secret of all. The people who never run out of things to say aren't constantly searching for better words. They're building a better relationship with the world. They walk slower. They notice more. They ask questions most people never think to ask. They become fascinated by ordinary things. A street musician, a forgotten photograph, the way someone's face lights up when they talk about their childhood, a grandfather teaching his grandson how to fish, a stranger reading the same book they love. To most people, those moments pass by unnoticed. To a curious person, they're the beginning of another story. And story after story, conversation after conversation, they slowly become someone who always has something meaningful to say. Not because they practice sounding interesting, because they practiced being interested. There's a difference. One is exhausting, the other is endless. Here's a thought. Imagine meeting yourself 5 years from today. Not a richer version, not a more successful version, just a more curious version. Someone who spent 5 years collecting observations instead of assumptions, questions instead of judgments, experiences instead of endless scrolling. Do you think that version of you would struggle to hold a conversation? Probably not, because every day I would have quietly given them something new to share. And that's the beautiful part. You don't become a great conversationalist overnight. You become one ordinary day at a time, one observation, one question, one meaningful conversation, one unexpected moment, until one day someone walks away from talking to you and says, I don't know why, but I could have talked to them for hours. Like, they won't realize what happened. Like, they'll think it was your confidence, your charisma, your personality, but you'll know the truth. It wasn't confidence that kept the conversation alive. It was curiosity, because curiosity never runs out. It simply finds another door to open. So the next time you find yourself in an awkward silence, don't panic. Don't rush to fill the space. Don't search your memory for the perfect sentence. Instead, look, listen, notice, ask. The next great conversation isn't hiding inside your head. It's hiding in the person sitting across from you, in the world happening around you, in the tiny details everyone else walks past, because the real reason you never know what to say was never a lack of words. It was a lack of attention. And the moment you start noticing life again, you'll discover something surprising. You don't have to become more interesting. You simply have to become more curious. Because people who never run out of things to say never stop finding things worth noticing. And once you learn to see the world that way, you'll realize the conversation was never the hard part. The hard part was remembering to truly look. Keep questioning, keep learning. See you next time.